The Age of Industrial Awakening. The Age of Industrial Awakening marked a dramatic shift that redefined the fabric of human civilization in ways that were unthinkable mere decades earlier. Extending from the late 1700s into the mid 1800s, this transformative period witnessed a massive transition from agriculture based economies to mechanized industrial societies, permanently changing how individuals worked, lived, and related to each other. One can envision this era as an enormous wave of progress washing over Europe and beyond, leaving behind a world deeply altered. Before this industrial upheaval, everyday existence was strongly tied to rural customs. Most individuals resided in small countryside communities, cultivating the land or producing handmade goods. Life moved in tune with the natural seasons, and technological advancements were rare and barely noticeable. However, as the 18th century unfolded, quiet yet impactful developments began to emerge. Breakthroughs in farming methods, such as rotational cropping and the selective breeding of animals, significantly boosted agricultural yields. This rise in food availability reduced the number of people needed on farms and released a growing labor force. These newly available workers began to cluster in expanding cities, creating the ideal environment for the rise of industry. At the core of this industrial age stood the factory, an almost legendary symbol representing both immense opportunity and major disruption. These production hubs drove economic growth, energized by revolutionary devices like James Hargreaves' spinning jenny, which enabled one person to spin multiple threads at once, and Richard Arkwright's water frame, which used water power to operate machines. These trailblazing inventions utterly transformed textile manufacturing, turning it from a home-based art into a massive-scale industrial enterprise. Picture entering one of these early 19th century factories, the air buzzing with the rhythmic thump of machines, the metallic grinding of gears, and workers' voices struggling to rise above the deafening clamor. Men, women, and children alike labored shoulder to shoulder, performing the same mechanical tasks for endless hours. Though these establishments stood as marvels of output, they also ushered in major societal shifts. The independent artisan was now replaced by the factory laborer, marking the emergence of a new class of workers tethered not to land or seasons, but to strict schedules and punch clocks. Urban expansion became one of the most striking effects of industrialization. Cities such as Manchester and Birmingham grew rapidly, absorbing waves of rural migrants in search of employment within the booming factory scene. These quickly growing urban landscapes transformed into lively industrial centers, but also suffered from severe issues. Overcrowding, dirty living conditions, and rampant pollution were common realities. Thick clouds of smoke from coal-powered industries darkened the sky, while waterways became tainted by factory discharge. For countless people, the dream of urban prosperity came hand in hand with harsh living conditions. Despite these hardships, this revolutionary era also delivered incredible technological feats that stretched the boundaries of human potential. One of the period's greatest accomplishments was the steam engine, refined by James Watt. This innovation energized machinery, locomotives, and sea vessels, forever altering travel and production. Steam-powered trains bridged towns and cities in unprecedented ways, revolutionizing both commerce and communication. Imagine a time when journeys that once required weeks by horse-drawn carriage could now be completed in a few days via railway. The world began to feel smaller, more interlinked, and far more vibrant. On a cultural level, the industrial shift sparked meaningful conversations about humanity's position within this rapidly evolving world. The Romantic literary movement, led by visionaries like William Wordsworth and Mary Shelley, emerged in opposition to mechanization, championing the splendor of nature and the profound emotional landscape of human beings. Simultaneously, the ideals of the Enlightenment, liberty, justice, and human dignity started to gain traction. Workers, spurred by the injustices they endured, began organizing to call for improved pay, reduced hours, and better working environments. Their unified efforts laid the groundwork for labor reforms that would define the 1800s and 1900s. The Industrial Awakening was not limited to Western Europe and North America. It had global consequences, though not all positive. Industrial powers scoured the world for raw materials and new marketplaces, which intensified colonial ambitions and drastically transformed the economies of regions such as Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The global web of production and exchange created during this period formed the basis for today's international economy, an influence that still shapes our world. In its aftermath, this epoch left a planet that was entirely transformed. The age brought about astonishing leaps in machinery, medical science, and transportation, laying the foundation for the modern age. Yet it also underscored the price of progress, environmental damage, widening social gaps, and the alienation of workers from their labor. This period remains a potent example of the double-edged sword of innovation, where every forward leap carries the weight of both reward and risk. Ultimately, the Industrial Awakening wasn't merely an episode of advancement. It was a bold redefinition of human potential. It taught us to challenge the boundaries of the known, to embrace change, and to build new futures. As we reflect on this monumental moment in history, we are reminded that while progress brings complexity, it is by facing and understanding these intricacies that humanity continues to evolve and shape its collective destiny. The Revolutionary Tempest of France. The upheaval known as the French Revolution, an era of extreme turbulence and monumental transformation between 1789 and 1799, represents one of the most defining chapters in the annals of humanity. It dismantled the ancient institutions of monarchy and feudal hierarchy, replacing them with the principles of liberty, equality, and brotherhood, ideals that would echo through revolutions and political philosophies for generations. Far from being a localized event, the French Revolution sent shockwaves around the world, confronting entrenched authority and reconstructing the very concept of the people's bond with political power. To grasp its origins, envision a nation teetering on the brink of social disintegration, burdened by economic hardship and widening inequality. In the waning years of the 1700s, France's society was structured into a rigid three-tier system: the clergy, the aristocracy, and the vast Third Estate composed of everyday citizens. While the clergy and nobles lived in abundance and enjoyed tax exemptions, the Third Estate, consisting of farmers, city laborers, and an expanding bourgeoisie, shouldered the weight of heavy taxation and eked out meager livelihoods, all while the upper classes thrived in opulence. This deep schism between the privileged elite and the struggling majority bred intense bitterness. The financial toll of expensive wars, including France's support in the American Revolution, combined with successive poor harvests that caused bread prices to soar, steered the nation into financial collapse. The impoverished populace, already desperate for sustenance, now longed for fairness and political voice. The Enlightenment, a movement of intellectual awakening, advocating logic, individual freedoms, and social parity, provided the philosophical underpinning for this discontent. Visionaries such as Rousseau, Voltaire, and Montesquieu questioned the legitimacy of monarchic rule and championed the sovereignty of ordinary citizens, laying the groundwork for an entirely new political vision. By 1789, the mounting tensions reached a climax. Confronted with fiscal disaster, King Louis XVI summoned the Estates General, a representative assembly convened to seek solutions. However, weary of being sidelined, the Third Estate declared itself the National Assembly and resolved to draft a constitution. This defiant act marked the official launch of the revolution. The assault on the Bastille on July 14, 1789, soon became the revolution's iconic moment. Picture thousands of desperate Parisians converging on the old fortress, not merely to seize weapons, but to symbolically destroy an enduring emblem of despotism. Their triumph echoed throughout France, igniting revolutionary fervor among the masses. In rural regions, unrest intensified during what became known as the Great Fear. Peasants, driven by hope and rage, torched manor homes and obliterated feudal archives in a bid to erase generations of oppression. Meanwhile, the National Assembly acted rapidly to reform the state. In August 1789, they issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a pioneering document proclaiming liberty, equality, and universal rights. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights, it asserted, a radical and world-shaking proposition. For the first time, governance founded upon popular accountability began to materialize, starkly opposing the autocratic systems of the past. Yet no revolution unfolds in a straight line. France's path soon twisted into chaos. Internal divisions among revolutionaries and external threats from fearful neighboring monarchies intensified fear and instability. The Jacobins, a fervent political group led by Maximilien Robespierre, seized control and ushered in a harrowing phase, the Reign of Terror. Between 1793 and 1794, France descended into an atmosphere of dread and suspicion. Imagine a society where merely being accused of opposing the revolution could send one to the guillotine. The noble goals of freedom and fairness were overwhelmed by an obsessive drive for ideological purity. Thousands lost their lives, including King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. Despite this bloodshed, the revolution did produce lasting transformations. Feudal privileges were abolished, and secular governance was established. The terror ended with Robespierre's own execution, and a more moderate chapter, known as the Thermidorian Reaction, sought to calm the unrest and rebuild order. Nevertheless, France remained a nation in turmoil. Amid this uncertainty, an ambitious and charismatic military commander emerged, Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1799, Napoleon orchestrated a coup d'état, effectively concluding the revolution and instituting the consulate with himself as first consul. Though he would later crown himself emperor, Napoleon maintained key revolutionary reforms, including the Napoleonic Code, which enshrined legal equality and secular law. His leadership marked the transition from revolutionary fervor to imperial rule, but the revolution's influence extended far and wide. It inspired liberation movements across continents, from Haiti, where enslaved people revolted and secured freedom, to Latin America, where colonial populations challenged European domination. Moreover, the revolution reshaped political ideology, embedding core concepts such as human rights, civic responsibility, and participatory government into the foundation of modern politics. Yet its legacy remains deeply paradoxical. Though it preached liberty, it unleashed terror. Though it dismantled feudal orders, it often failed to deliver on its promises, especially to women and marginalized communities. Still, the French Revolution endures as a symbol of the human spirit's refusal to accept injustice. It was more than an isolated upheaval. It was a turning point that swept away the remnants of the old world and planted the seeds of modern democratic values. Its principles continue to inspire, reminding us that collective action can alter the course of history, and that the pursuit of justice and freedom is a continuing journey. The expansion of global colonial powers. The ascent of global colonial powers from the 15th to the 20th century signaled a monumental transformation in world history, an era marked by adventurous journeys, forceful domination, and the reshaping of civilizations across continents. Envision the planet as a giant canvas of unexplored oceans and unfamiliar territories, while European nations, driven by desire for riches, power, and enlightenment, cast their ambitions across the seas. What ensued was an intense whirlwind of exploration and imperial expansion, a force that spurred fierce rivalries, triggered cultural intermingling, and left behind deep and often painful legacies that still reverberate today. Colonialism found its early footing during the Age of Discovery in the late 1400s, when European empires searched frantically for new trading passages to the east. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 severed critical land-based routes to Asia, setting off a determined pursuit of sea-based alternatives to reach the wealthy lands of the Orient. It was during this pivotal period that explorers like Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and Ferdinand Magellan set sail on expeditions that would redraw the boundaries of what was considered the known world. Visualize Columbus steering his trio of modest vessels, fragile yet fearless, into the Atlantic, guided by dreams of finding Asia. Instead, he stumbled upon the Caribbean, unknowingly unveiling an entirely unfamiliar continent. This monumental discovery sparked exhilaration, but also unleashed a tidal wave of ambition and rivalry among European powers, eager to stake claims and extract resources. Spain and Portugal swiftly rose as dominant imperial players, establishing vast dominions in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. The immense influx of precious metals like gold and silver from the New World flooded European economies, drastically altering financial systems and accelerating further voyages. Picture the energetic harbors of Seville, where Spanish galleons returned overflowing with treasures, gold, silver, and exotic goods, fueling Spain's rise as a global titan. However, this economic ascendance came with devastating consequences. The native peoples of the Americas suffered gravely, forced into labor, driven from their homelands, and decimated by European diseases. Entire civilizations were dismantled in the name of empire. Ancient societies like the Aztecs and Incas were overrun by conquistadors such as Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro, falling not just to superior weaponry, but to an imperial ideology that valued conquest over coexistence. By the 1600s, the colonial stage grew even more crowded as England, France, and the Netherlands entered the imperial fray. Unlike Spain and Portugal, these emerging powers emphasized trade networks and colonial settlements in North America, the Caribbean, and parts of Asia. The development of joint stock corporations, like the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company, revolutionized colonial strategies by merging capitalist enterprise with territorial ambition. These companies gained immense influence, managing colonies, waging wars, and profiting immensely from commerce involving spices, textiles, and enslaved individuals. Picture the bustling ports of Amsterdam and London filled with ships laden with sugar, tobacco, and spices, luxuries extracted from colonies, transforming European markets and urban life. However, this prosperity was born on the suffering of the enslaved and the exploited. The transatlantic slave trade, driven by the insatiable need for plantation labor in the Americas, remains one of the darkest stains of the colonial age. Millions of Africans were violently uprooted from their native lands, forced to endure unimaginable brutality, forever altering the cultural and demographic makeup of the Atlantic world. Colonial expansion wasn't only about economics, it was also a vehicle for vast cultural transformation. European missionaries, for instance, embarked on spiritual campaigns to spread Christianity, often by overriding indigenous faiths. Imagine a secluded village where missionaries introduced unfamiliar religious customs, supplanting ancestral traditions and altering community identities. While some native groups absorbed European influences, others fiercely resisted, leading to revolts and prolonged periods of unrest. The 18th century Enlightenment introduced new philosophies that began to challenge the moral justifications of colonial domination. Thinkers like John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau emphasized human rights and government by consent, casting doubt on the ethical basis of imperial control. These ideas not only shook European thought, but also sowed the seeds of liberation within colonized nations. The American Revolution and the Haitian Revolution revealed that oppressed people could overthrow colonial rule, paving the way for future independent struggles. During the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution reshaped colonial dynamics dramatically, with inventions like steamships, railways, and telegraphs. Resource extraction became faster, and imperial control grew more efficient. European empires expanded even further into Africa and Asia, often under the pretense of civilizing savage lands. This phase, sometimes termed the New Imperialism, triggered a frenzied competition for land, symbolized by events like the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 85, where European nations divided Africa with little regard for native populations or existing borders. Ironically, the very tools that facilitated empire, schools, printing presses, and trains also empowered anti-colonial resistance. Figures like Mahatma Gandhi in India and Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana emerged as powerful leaders, drawing from Enlightenment values and popular discontent to advocate for national sovereignty. By the mid-1900s, the devastation of two global wars further weakened colonial powers' grip on their territories, ushering in a sweeping wave of decolonization. As nations across Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean reclaimed their independence, the old imperial order gave way to a new world structure. The emergence of colonial empires represents a paradox in human history, a tale woven from threads of ingenuity and devastation. While it connected distant societies through global commerce and cultural diffusion, it simultaneously entrenched systemic exploitation, inequality, and profound suffering. Today, the consequences of colonialism are still visible, shaping international relations, economic patterns, and cultural identities. As we reflect on this historical period, we confront a vital truth that unchecked ambition and the relentless pursuit of power can lead to immense human cost. The story of colonial expansion stands as a powerful reminder of humanity's dual capacity to build and to destroy, a lesson in the ongoing challenge of wielding influence with justice and conscience. The American Rebellion, forging a nation from resistance. The American Revolution, widely hailed as a foundation of modern democracy, was not simply a battle between Great Britain and its colonies across the Atlantic. It was a sweeping ideological revolution, a bold stand for liberty, self-rule, and the reimagining of individual rights. Envision 13 unique colonies, each possessing its own customs and identity, increasingly united by frustration toward a remote crown that enforced laws without offering a voice in return. This building resentment would erupt into a movement that shook the globe and transformed human history. Long before the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord, the roots of rebellion had already taken hold. Burdened by debts from the costly French and Indian War, the British government turned to its American territories for financial relief. Parliament imposed taxes like the Stamp Act of 1765 and the Townshend Acts of 1767, stirring outrage in the colonies, where there was no representation in Parliament. No taxation without representation became a defiant slogan, an emphatic demand for justice and autonomy. Imagine a crowded tavern in Boston, alive with heated discussions. Merchants, blacksmiths, and farmers alike, fueled by ale and anger, shared stories of economic burdens and royal overreach. Discontent swiftly became action. In 1773, the Boston Tea Party turned protest into spectacle. Colonists disguised as Mohawks dumped British tea into the harbor as a bold rejection of unfair taxation. The waters churned with rebellion, foreshadowing the storm to come. That storm broke on April 19, 1775, when British soldiers met colonial militias at Lexington and Concord. The crackle of musket fire pierced the morning air. The shot heard round the world. These confrontations marked the beginning of a struggle not just for territory, but for a new political vision that would question kingship itself. As fighting intensified, the colonies sought cohesion. The Continental Congress emerged as a unifying force, and by mid-1776, the call for independence was growing louder. In Philadelphia, delegates gathered to craft a revolutionary statement. Thomas Jefferson's eloquent words in the Declaration of Independence claimed that all men are created equal and endowed with unalienable rights. In Independence Hall, tension filled the air as men debated and then signed this radical document, formally committing the colonies to the path of sovereignty. But freedom would not come without sacrifice. The American military, made up of militias, part-time soldiers, and farmers, faced the daunting might of the British Empire, one of the strongest armies in the world. Under the command of General George Washington, the Continental Army endured unimaginable trials. Picture the brutal winter at Valley Forge in 1777, soldiers dressed in worn, thin garments, shivering in makeshift shelters, holding on to hope and purpose through the biting cold. Key triumphs like the American victory at Saratoga lifted morale and persuaded France to ally with the revolutionary cause. French support, both military and financial, transformed a regional rebellion into a global conflict. French troops and warships joined American forces, culminating in the pivotal siege of Yorktown in 1781. Imagine the jubilation as British General Cornwallis surrendered and flags of two nations waved together in triumph. The struggle that began with protest in colonial streets ended with victory on the battlefield. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, officially ended hostilities and granted the former colonies independence, giving birth to the United States of America. But the war's conclusion marked only the beginning of a much more difficult journey, constructing a viable new government. The fledgling republic wrestled with pressing issues: how to govern, how to unite, and how to uphold the rights it had so passionately declared. The initial attempt, the Articles of Confederation, soon revealed its weaknesses, leading to the Constitutional Convention in 1787. There, delegates framed the U.S. Constitution, creating a government rooted in the consent of the governed, while the Bill of Rights enshrined protections for individual freedoms. Still, the Revolution's noble ideals were not fully extended to all. Though the Declaration of Independence spoke of equality, the new nation continued to confront the injustices of slavery, the exclusion of women from political life, and the displacement of native peoples. These contradictions would become central to the American struggle for justice in the centuries that followed. The influence of the American Revolution reached far beyond U.S. borders. Its principles inspired waves of revolution and reform around the globe, from France to Latin America, demonstrating that ordinary people could rise against authoritarian rule and forge governments based on liberty and fairness. Reflecting on the American Revolution reveals that it was far more than a military conflict. It was a dramatic transformation in how human beings conceived of power, rights, and governance. It showcased the might of collective determination, the courage to resist oppression, and the lasting power of ideas rooted in self-rule and human dignity. Through the vision and sacrifice of its revolutionaries, the American colonies forged a new nation and reshaped the course of history. The legacy of their struggle reminds us that the quest for a freer, more just world is an ongoing endeavor, and one worth every sacrifice. Napoleon's Europe, ambition, war, and the remaking of a continent. The Napoleonic Wars, which raged from 1803 to 1815, marked one of the most turbulent and transformative periods in European history. It was a time defined by sweeping political upheaval, unrelenting military conflict, and the towering aspirations of a single figure, Napoleon Bonaparte. Picture a continent in chaos, where revolutionary ideals collided with imperial ambitions, and traditional monarchies struggled to survive in the face of relentless change. Empires rose and crumbled, borders shifted like tides, and the very structure of European society was reshaped. The origins of these wars trace back to the French Revolution of 1789, which shattered centuries of monarchical control and stirred powerful demands for liberty, equality, and fraternity. Amid the chaos, a brilliant young general from Corsica, Napoleon Bonaparte emerged as both a symbol of order and a military genius. His strategic brilliance and magnetic leadership propelled him quickly through the military ranks, capturing the hearts and hopes of the French people. By 1799, Napoleon orchestrated a coup d'état, seizing power and becoming first consul of France. In a bold act of self-legitimization, he crowned himself emperor in 1804 at Notre Dame Cathedral, an audacious gesture that symbolized his rejection of any authority above his own, including the Pope. As Napoleon strengthened his grip on power, Europe's monarchies grew increasingly anxious. Nations such as Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia joined forces in coalitions to stop the growing French menace. What followed was over a decade of conflict that would engulf the continent in a storm of war, with Napoleon as its central force. His campaigns would become legendary. The Grande Armée, renowned for its discipline and mobility, operated with astonishing speed and deadly precision. In 1805, at the famous Battle of Austerlitz, often dubbed the Battle of the Three Emperors, Napoleon outmaneuvered the combined Russian and Austrian forces through brilliant tactics and deception. It was a devastating victory that solidified his reputation as one of the greatest military commanders in history. Imagine a misty battlefield as French soldiers moved with such coordination and grace that even enemy generals were forced to admire their effectiveness. At the height of his reign, Napoleon radically altered the political map of Europe. He dismantled the ancient Holy Roman Empire, replacing it with the Confederation of the Rhine, a network of client states aligned with France. His Napoleonic Code introduced progressive legal reforms centered on equality, meritocracy, and secular law, setting a precedent for modern civil governance that still echoes today. But Napoleon's dream of a unified Europe under French control also ignited fierce opposition. Nationalist movements began to rise, especially in places like Germany and Spain, where resentment of foreign domination turned into determined resistance. Nowhere was this more evident than in the Peninsular War. Initially seen as liberators, French troops quickly became occupiers, facing brutal guerrilla warfare from Spanish civilians and British forces under the Duke of Wellington. Picture rugged hills where villagers turned into stealthy fighters, ambushing French convoys before disappearing into the countryside. This prolonged conflict sapped French morale and drained resources, becoming a festering wound in Napoleon's campaign. The downfall truly began in 1812, when Napoleon launched his ill-fated invasion of Russia. Determined to enforce his continental system, an economic blockade meant to cripple Britain, he led over 600,000 troops into the vast Russian wilderness. The campaign started with confidence but soon descended into disaster. The Russian military retreated while destroying everything in their wake, denying the French supplies. When Napoleon finally reached Moscow, the city was deserted and set ablaze. There was no victory to claim, no shelter to be found. As the harsh winter set in, his once mighty army was ravaged by starvation, frostbite, disease, and constant Russian attacks. Picture a shattered army, barely clothed, stumbling through snow and ice. Fewer than 50,000 would return. This catastrophic loss shattered the myth of Napoleon's invincibility. The Allied powers seized the opportunity, and in 1814, they marched into Paris. Napoleon was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the island of Elba, but his story did not end there. In a stunning twist, Napoleon escaped from Elba in 1815 and returned to France, reclaiming power during what came to be known as the 100 Days. The brief resurgence culminated in the fateful Battle of Waterloo. Facing the combined might of British and Prussian forces led by the Duke of Wellington and General Blucher, Napoleon engaged in a brutal, chaotic struggle. Despite early gains, his troops were eventually outmaneuvered and crushed. This final defeat sealed his fate. Napoleon was exiled once again, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he would spend the rest of his life in isolation. The Napoleonic Wars left a profound impact on Europe and the world. They redefined military strategy, introduced large-scale conscription, and influenced the rise of nationalism. The Congress of Vienna, convened after Napoleon's defeat, sought to restore stability and redraw the European map. Its decisions shaped international diplomacy for decades to come. And yet, the revolutionary ideals that Napoleon once carried, liberty, equality, secular governance, continued to influence political thought long after his fall. Even as he became a cautionary tale of overreaching ambition, his legacy as a reformer, strategist, and visionary endured. The saga of the Napoleonic Wars is a powerful story of vision and violence, resistance and resilience. It is a testament to the power of individual will to shape history, and a reminder of the enduring conflict between ideology and empire. As we look back on this era, we see more than just battles. We see a world in the midst of transformation, and a leader whose impact still resonates across continents and centuries. The World Wars, a century shaped by fire and fury. World War I and World War II were not just battles fought between nations. They were seismic events that transformed the course of history. These global conflicts redefined borders, upended societies, and left lasting psychological wounds on both nations and individuals. To truly grasp their monumental significance, we must delve into the causes, key events, and consequences of each war, exploring how they shaped the modern world. The roots of World War I stretched deep into the early 20th century, a period simmering with nationalist fervor, military buildups, and entangled alliances. Imagine Europe as a coiled spring, wound tight and ready to snap. Tensions ran high among powers like Germany, Austria, Hungary, Russia, and France, all jostling for dominance. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in June 1914 was the spark that ignited the powder keg. What followed was a chain reaction. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, activating a complex alliance system that rapidly drew major powers into the conflict. Soon, the Central Powers, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and later the Ottoman Empire, were at war with the Allies, which included France, Russia, and Great Britain. By August 1914, Europe was fully engulfed in a war that would drag on for 4 agonizing years. The face of warfare had changed forever. Traditional battle strategies gave way to the horrors of trench warfare. Envision vast, muddy trenches stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland, grim, disease-ridden corridors where soldiers endured relentless bombardment and the ever-present shadow of death. The Western Front became a landscape of suffering and stalemate. Battles like the Somme and Verdun came to symbolize the terrifying new reality of industrialized war, where millions died for mere scraps of land. The war didn't just devastate the battlefield, it transformed life on the home front. Propaganda campaigns dominated newspapers. Citizens were urged to ration food and materials to support the war effort. In many countries, women stepped into roles traditionally held by men, working in factories and contributing to the war economy, permanently altering gender norms and expectations. World War I was global in scope. Soldiers from colonial territories fought under the banners of their imperial rulers, many hoping that their service would be rewarded with autonomy. These aspirations would later give rise to powerful independence movements across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. By 1918, the Central Powers were unraveling. Exhausted, divided, and economically broken, they sought peace. On November 11, 1918, an armistice was signed, halting the fighting. The Treaty of Versailles followed in 1919, formally ending the war. Its harsh terms imposed crushing reparations on Germany and redrew the map of Europe. Yet the treaty also planted the seeds of future conflict, breeding resentment and economic despair within Germany. As the world stumbled into the 1930s, the shadow of World War I still loomed. The Great Depression deepened social and political unrest, paving the way for authoritarian regimes to rise. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party exploited national bitterness and economic turmoil, promoting an aggressive ultra-nationalist ideology. In Italy, Benito Mussolini's fascist regime followed a similar path, while Japan pursued militaristic expansion throughout Asia. Germany's invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, using rapid and ruthless tactics known as Blitzkrieg, Lightning War, marked the official start of World War II. Imagine columns of tanks and waves of aircraft unleashing coordinated assaults, toppling defenses in days, and shocking the world with the speed and brutality of modern warfare. The conflict quickly spread, drawing in nations from across the globe. The Allies, initially Britain and France, soon included the Soviet Union and the United States, the latter entering the war after Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. Unlike its predecessor, World War II truly lived up to its name as a worldwide struggle. One of the war's darkest legacies was the Holocaust, the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews and millions of others labeled undesirable by the Nazi regime. These atrocities, committed in death camps like Auschwitz and Treblinka, revealed the horrific depths of human cruelty. The Holocaust remains a haunting testament to the consequences of unchecked hatred and totalitarian ideology. World War II was a total war. Entire populations were mobilized, factories converted to produce weapons, civilians endured rationing, blackouts, and air raids. In Britain, the Battle of Britain saw the population endure constant aerial bombardment while resisting Nazi invasion. Across the globe, ordinary people became the lifeblood of vast war machines. Major turning points began to shift momentum in the Allies' favor. The Battle of Stalingrad marked a catastrophic defeat for Germany on the Eastern Front. The D-Day landings in Normandy on June 6, 1944, initiated a massive Allied push to liberate Western Europe. By May 1945, Nazi Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in the Pacific ended soon after, following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August, ushering in a terrifying new era of nuclear warfare. World War II claimed the lives of an estimated 70 to 85 million people, making it the deadliest conflict in human history. Its conclusion reshaped global politics. The United Nations was established to promote peace and prevent future wars. Two new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, emerged, setting the stage for the Cold War and a new kind of geopolitical rivalry. Together, the two world wars serve as cautionary tales, testaments to the volatility of nationalism, the dangers of authoritarianism, and the devastating costs of unresolved grievances. They show how quickly global order can collapse and how profoundly war affects the lives of everyday people. As we reflect on these monumental chapters of history, we are reminded of the importance of diplomacy, empathy, and cooperation. The legacy of the world wars continues to shape our world, urging us to learn from the past in order to build a more peaceful and just future. The Cold War, an era of shadows, power, and ideological fire. The Cold War, a phrase steeped in meaning, describes a time of intense global tension and ideological confrontation that spanned nearly 50 years. Unlike traditional wars fought on battlefields, this was a war of influence, politics, science, and strategy. It was a global chess match between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Each move they made risked tipping the world from uneasy peace into total destruction. The seeds of this conflict were planted in the ashes of World War II. Though they had been allies in defeating the Axis powers, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged with fundamentally different visions for the post-war world. America stood for democracy and capitalism. The USSR pushed for communism and centralized state control. these weren't just economic systems, they were competing worldviews, each claiming to offer a better future. Picture a global chessboard stretching across continents, each piece a nation drawn into the orbit of one superpower or the other. The first clear signs of division appeared in post-war Europe. As countries rebuilt, Europe split into two spheres of influence. The Soviet Union tightened its grip on Eastern Europe, turning nations like Poland and East Germany into satellite states. Meanwhile, the Western powers, led by the United States, championed liberal democracy, culminating in the formation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, in 1949, a military alliance that promised collective defense against Soviet aggression. Winston Churchill captured this division with the phrase Iron Curtain, a powerful metaphor for the ideological and physical divide between East and West. Nowhere was this divide more symbolically charged than in Berlin, a city split between Soviet and Allied control. In 1948, the Soviets attempted to force the Allies out of West Berlin by imposing a blockade. In response, Western powers launched the Berlin Airlift, flying in food, fuel, and vital supplies for almost an entire year. The skies over Berlin became a symbol of resistance and resilience, an early Cold War victory for the West. As the rivalry deepened, its effects spread beyond Europe. Proxy wars became the Cold War's trademark, as the superpowers supported opposing sides in regional conflicts. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953, was one of the first such clashes. Backed by the Soviets and China, North Korea invaded the South. The United States, supported by a coalition of United Nations forces, intervened. The war ended in stalemate, with Korea still divided along the 38th parallel, a division that remains to this day. But the Cold War was fought not just on land, it reached into the stars. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite, shocking the West and igniting the space race. The U.S. responded with the Apollo program, eventually landing a man on the moon in 1969, a bold declaration of technological and ideological triumph. Beneath these symbolic victories, however, loomed a far more dangerous contest: the nuclear arms race. Both the US and the Soviet Union stockpiled vast arsenals of nuclear weapons, bound by the chilling doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD. In this high-stakes standoff, even a single misstep could unleash global annihilation. That terrifying possibility became real in October 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. When American surveillance revealed Soviet nuclear missiles being installed in Cuba, just 90 miles from the US coast, the world stood still. For 13 harrowing days, humanity held its breath as leaders negotiated under immense pressure. At the very brink of nuclear war, a fragile agreement was reached, and disaster was narrowly averted. Despite these moments of peril, efforts to ease tensions emerged in the form of détente during the 1970s. Arms control treaties like the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT, sought to slow the arms race. Yet peace was often fragile. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 reignited Cold War hostilities, prompting the United States to support Afghan resistance forces, another chapter in the ongoing global chess match. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was showing signs of strain. Under Mikhail Gorbachev, reforms were introduced in an effort to rescue the faltering Soviet economy. His policies of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, unintentionally unleashed forces of change. Dissatisfaction and nationalism spread through Eastern Europe. One by one, countries began asserting their independence. In 1989, the world watched as the Berlin Wall, perhaps the most potent symbol of Cold War division, was torn down by ordinary people. East and West Berliners, reunited after decades, swung hammers and cheered. It was a moment of triumph, hope, and liberation. Just 2 years later, in 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved, breaking into 15 independent republics. The Cold War had ended, not with a final battle, but with a collapse from within. In its aftermath, the United States stood alone as the world's sole superpower. Former Soviet states faced the daunting challenge of rebuilding and redefining themselves. Though the ideological war was over, the Cold War's legacy was far-reaching. Its influence shaped global politics, spurred astonishing technological progress, and left an indelible mark on culture, from cinema and literature to education and propaganda. Yet, the era also left deep scars, divided nations, countless lives lost in proxy conflicts, and a lingering atmosphere of mistrust. As we look back on the Cold War, it serves as both a warning and a lesson. It reminds us of how quickly global rivalries can spiral toward catastrophe, and how diplomacy, negotiation, and understanding must guide our path forward. Though the Cold War ended decades ago, its echoes still shape the world we live in, urging us to favor unity over division, cooperation over confrontation, and peace over power. The space race, humanity's greatest leap into the unknown. The space race, a thrilling chapter in our shared history, stands as a powerful symbol of ambition, rivalry, and limitless innovation. It was more than a competition between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. It represented humanity's deep-rooted desire to explore the stars, and at the same time, a high-stakes battlefield for ideological dominance during the Cold War. To understand the space race is to witness a dramatic saga in which the very idea of what was possible was reimagined, and where the stars became the ultimate prize. In the wake of World War II, the global order shifted dramatically. The US and the USSR rose as dominant forces, locked in a tense contest for influence. Space, vast and unclaimed, emerged as the new arena, a realm where dreams of exploration collided with strategic calculation. The race truly ignited in 1957, when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite. Picture a polished metal sphere orbiting silently, broadcasting a steady signal that circled the globe. That beep was more than a technical marvel. It was a wake-up call. The Soviets had taken the lead in the battle for the cosmos. In the United States, this sparked a storm of urgency. Space was no longer a distant idea. It had become a critical Cold War theater. Education shifted. Science and math gained priority. Research funding skyrocketed. In 1958, the US created NASA, signaling its full commitment to catching up and then surpassing the Soviet Union. But progress didn't come easily. America's early ventures into space were marked by public setbacks, rockets that failed to launch, missions that missed their mark. Each failure raised the pressure, transforming the space race into a relentless contest for technological mastery and national pride. Then, in 1961, the Soviets pulled ahead again. Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit Earth aboard Vostok 1. His journey captured the world's imagination and highlighted the Soviet Union's upper hand. In the West, it was a stark reminder of the stakes at hand. In response, US President John F. Kennedy delivered a bold and visionary challenge to land a man on the moon before the end of the decade. His words, "We choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard," galvanized a nation. They reflected the spirit of determination and innovation that would define a generation. NASA's Apollo program became the cornerstone of this mission. It was a colossal undertaking, demanding advanced technology, flawless coordination, and extraordinary human courage. The road was treacherous. In 1967, a pre-launch test for Apollo 1 ended in tragedy, killing 3 astronauts. The loss was heartbreaking, but it strengthened the resolve of those determined to continue. Engineers, scientists, and astronauts pressed on, driven by a belief that their mission transcended borders. They were not just serving their country, they were pushing humanity deeper into the cosmos. On July 20th, 1969, the world watched in stunned silence and awe as Apollo 11 made history. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the moon's surface, while Michael Collins orbited above in the command module. Armstrong's iconic words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," echoed through living rooms, classrooms, and hearts across the planet. The moon landing was more than a Cold War milestone. It was a triumph of the human spirit. It proved what was possible when courage, unity, and imagination came together. Though the space race continued beyond that moment, the moon landing was its undeniable peak. For the first time, all of humanity looked up, not in fear, but in wonder. And while it began as a competition, the space race eventually opened the door to collaboration. In 1975, American and Soviet spacecraft docked in space during the Apollo-Soyuz test project, a gesture that hinted at a future where nations could explore together. This spirit of cooperation would later pave the way for the International Space Station, where scientists from around the globe work side by side in pursuit of knowledge. The legacy of the space race stretches far beyond rockets and moon missions. It sparked innovations in satellite technology, communication, and even medicine. It inspired countless young minds to become scientists, engineers, and dreamers. But perhaps most importantly, it reminded us that Earth is not the end of our journey. As we now set our sights on Mars, explore exoplanets, and search for life in distant galaxies, we carry forward the legacy of those first bold steps into space. The space race remains a powerful testament to what humanity can achieve when we reach beyond our limits and dare to touch the stars. The digital revolution, a new dawn of human connection and innovation. The digital revolution, a transformative era in human history, has profoundly reshaped the way we live, connecting us in ways once thought impossible and redefining how we work, learn, and communicate. Imagine waking up in a world where information flows as freely as air, where global connections are made in an instant and knowledge is always within reach. Beginning in the mid-20th century, this wave of technological innovation has only accelerated, influencing every aspect of modern society, culture, commerce, education, and beyond. The story of the digital revolution begins in the 1940s and 1950s, during the turmoil of World War II. Visionaries such as Alan Turing and John von Neumann led the development of early computers, gigantic machines powered by vacuum tubes and punch cards occupying entire rooms. Though primitive by today's standards, these machines could perform calculations in minutes that would have taken humans months. Picture engineers surrounded by flashing lights and humming machines, laying the first stones of a technological renaissance. A turning point came in 1947 with the invention of the transistor, a small but revolutionary device that replaced bulky vacuum tubes. It paved the way for computers to become smaller, faster, and far more efficient. By the 1970s, companies like Apple and IBM were placing personal computers into homes and offices. Picture the thrill of unboxing one, a window into an entirely new digital universe sitting right on your desk. Meanwhile, another quiet revolution was taking shape: the internet. Originally conceived in the 1960s as a military communication system, it evolved into a decentralized global network of computers. Imagine an invisible web stretching across continents, enabling people to share ideas and information instantly. Then came a defining moment in 1991, the introduction of the World Wide Web. This innovation transformed the internet from a technical network into a user-friendly platform, allowing anyone to access a vast digital universe with a single click. It was like stepping into an infinite library, one where every book, idea, or image could be summoned at will. This leap in technology changed the nature of knowledge itself. how we acquire it, share it, and build upon it. Learning, communication, and collaboration expanded on a global scale. Daily life shifted dramatically. Email and instant messaging revolutionized communication, shrinking distances and bringing people together across time zones. Think of a global cafe where conversations happen in real time, regardless of geography. Then came the rise of social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, redefining human interaction. These virtual communities transcended physical and cultural boundaries, uniting people while also raising concerns about privacy, misinformation, and mental health in a hyper-connected world. Economically, the digital revolution disrupted and redefined industries. E-commerce giants like Amazon changed the way we shop. Imagine your smartphone becoming a digital mall, with every product just a tap away. The gig economy followed, with platforms like Uber and Airbnb enabling flexible work models. This shift challenged traditional employment structures and sparked crucial debates about labor rights, security, and the future of work. In education, digital technology broke down long-standing barriers. With the rise of online courses, virtual classrooms, and educational apps, learning became accessible to anyone with an internet connection. Imagine a child in a remote village attending a live-streamed lecture by a world-renowned scientist, proof of digital education's transformative reach. The revolution also ushered in the age of data. Today, vast amounts of information are collected and analyzed to predict trends, tailor experiences, and optimize services. From healthcare to finance, data analytics is driving precision and innovation previously unimaginable. But this also raises urgent ethical questions. Who owns this data? How is it used? And what are the limits of surveillance and control? Despite its wonders, the digital revolution has laid bare a stark reality: the digital divide. Millions around the world still lack access to reliable technology and internet, raising pressing concerns about equity, inclusion, and opportunity in this digital age. It's a reminder that progress must be shared, or it risks leaving many behind. As technology continues to evolve at lightning speed, new challenges emerge. Cybersecurity, AI ethics, and the spread of disinformation now sit at the heart of our digital crossroads. We face the task of balancing innovation with responsibility, ensuring that digital tools uplift humanity rather than undermine it. The digital revolution is not just a technical shift, it is a cultural metamorphosis. With advancements like quantum computing, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence on the horizon, our future feels limitless. But this new era calls for more than innovation. It demands vigilance, critical thinking, and above all, ethical leadership. In the great narrative of human progress, the digital revolution marks a new dawn, one illuminated by creativity, connection, and possibility. As we embrace the vast opportunities of this digital age, let us also confront its challenges. Committed to building a world where technology empowers everyone and strengthens our shared pursuit of knowledge, unity, and human potential. Globalization and the shaping of modern history, weaving the tapestry of a connected world. Globalization and modern history are not separate stories. They are deeply intertwined narratives that chronicle humanity's long journey toward greater interconnection. Imagine a vast and intricate tapestry, each thread symbolizing a unique culture, economy, or community, woven together by the powerful forces of technology, trade, and communication. This evolving web has drawn the world closer than ever before, yet it also stirs profound questions about identity, culture, and our collective future. Long before the internet enabled instant global communication, ancient trade routes like the Silk Road served as lifelines of cultural and economic exchange. Envision merchants braving arid deserts and treacherous mountain passes, transporting silk, spices, and ideas that transcended empires. These routes didn't just carry goods, they also became channels for religions, philosophies, and technologies, planting the seeds of globalization thousands of years ago. As empires expanded, like those of Alexander the Great, they became melting pots of language, innovation, and belief. Alexander's conquests spread Greek culture across vast territories, blending with local traditions and giving rise to the Hellenistic world, an early example of the cultural fusion that globalization continues to foster today. The age of exploration in the 15th and 16th centuries ushered in a new era of global connectivity. Picture explorers like Christopher Columbus and Vasco da Gama, sailing into the unknown in pursuit of riches and glory. Their voyages linked continents, triggering an explosion of goods, ideas, and, tragically, diseases. The Columbian Exchange transformed diets. Potatoes and tomatoes revolutionized European cuisine, while horses and cattle reshaped life in the Americas. Yet this exchange came at a steep cost, as indigenous populations endured catastrophic losses due to disease and colonization. The Industrial Revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries dramatically accelerated globalization. Imagine factories rising amid plumes of steam, with workers toiling at machines that churned out goods at unprecedented speed. Railways and steamships shrank the world, connecting distant markets and fueling a surge in global commerce. However, this surge was built in part on the exploitation of colonies, highlighting the darker legacy of imperial-driven globalization. The 20th century brought both destruction and unity. World wars redrew borders and reshaped societies. But amid the wreckage came a yearning for cooperation. Picture the founding of the United Nations in 1945. Leaders from around the world gathering with a shared goal to prevent future wars and promote human rights. This spirit extended to economics, with institutions like the World Bank and International Monetary Fund aiming to support development and foster global trade. By the late 20th century, the digital revolution propelled globalization into a new dimension. Imagine a world where an email can cross the planet in seconds and knowledge is just a click away. The internet transformed the way we communicate, conduct business, and share culture, creating a global marketplace and fostering a sense of shared digital citizenship. Social media connected billions, enabling people to tell their stories, spark movements, and confront global challenges together. Yet this hyperconnectivity introduced new problems. Many communities remained on the wrong side of the digital divide without access to technology or internet. Meanwhile, concerns over privacy, misinformation, and cybersecurity revealed the vulnerabilities hidden beneath the surface of our connected world. Today, globalization stands as a double-edged sword. It fuels cultural exchange and economic growth, but can also lead to cultural homogenization and deepen social and economic inequalities. The struggle to preserve local identities while embracing global ties remains one of the great balancing acts of our time. The recent COVID-19 pandemic laid bare both the strengths and fragility of our interconnected systems. Global supply chains were disrupted, economies shaken, but at the same time, unprecedented scientific collaboration led to life-saving breakthroughs. This crisis reminded us of our shared humanity and the need for collective action in the face of global threats like climate change and public health. It's vital to remember that globalization isn't a singular force, it's a human-made process, shaped by our choices and values. As we move forward, we must ensure that the benefits of globalization are shared equitably, not reserved for a privileged few. Listening to marginalized voices, honoring cultural diversity, and promoting fairness are essential if we hope to shape a global future grounded in justice. Picture globalization as a living tapestry still in the making. Each of us holds a thread. Together we have the power to weave a world that celebrates diversity, fosters collaboration, and rises to meet the urgent challenges of our time. As this story continues to unfold, let us strive to create a narrative defined by inclusion, understanding, and shared prosperity. For in the vast and colorful fabric of human history, it is our common humanity that binds us, and our shared dreams that guide us toward a future worth creating.